Hello, and welcome to KRAD COVID readings for Trek Tuesday. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, trying to cure the coronavirus blues by reading my writing. We continue with Invincible, Book 1, which was a collaboration between myself and David Mack. This was the next story in the Starfleet Corps of Engineers series. These were the 7th and 8th installments, this is Book 7, of the monthly ebook only series that ran from 2000 to 2007. This was the only This is actually the only Star Trek. It's not my only collaboration, but it's the only Star Trek story that I did as a collaboration. Actually, my first two works, my first ever published short story, my first ever published novel, were both collaborations as well. And they were both Spider-Man stories, as it happens. An Evening in the Bronx with Venom, which I wrote with John Gregory Betancourt, and the novel Venom's Wrath, which I wrote with Jose Arnieto. And I've done other collaborations since, most recently the novels To Hell and Regroup with David Sherman, and Animal with Dr. Manish K. Batra. Anyway, before we start, I want to remind you guys that I have a Patreon, which could definitely use some more support, because it's got lots of nifty stuff that you're missing out on if you're not supporting it. I do one movie review a month, which you can get for $1 a month. I post almost daily cat pictures. I have two very photogenic cats, Kaylee and Louie, and I post pictures of them all the time. And for $2 a month, you get the movie reviews and the cat pictures. For $5 a month, you get the movie reviews, the cat pictures, and anywhere between 1 and 5 TV reviews per month. I'm trying to get that on a more regular schedule, but you always get at least some TV reviews. And I've got quite a backlog of TV shows I need to write about, so there's lots coming. For $7 a month, you get all that, plus weekly excerpts from my work in progress. Whether it's, my latest novel, my latest short story, whatever. Little excerpt from that work in progress is a tease of what's coming from me. For $10 a month, you get the TV reviews, the movie reviews, the cat pictures, the weekly looks at work in progress, plus every month will be a new vignette featuring one of my original characters. Somebody from the Precinct stories, from the Cassie Zukov stories, from the Super City Cop stories, from the Adventures of Brom Gold, from Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson, any of those. That's a new one every month. And then for $20 a month, you get all that, plus first looks at my first drafts. Every time I complete a short story or a chapter of a longer piece, you get a look at the raw, unedited first draft. It's a peek inside my process, as it were. So please consider supporting that. It's at patreon.com/crad. Lots of nifty stuff, and it's really cheap. Even the most expensive tier is $20 a month, and you can get plenty of good stuff for much less than that. So please consider it. It's patreon.com/crad. Anyway, moving on. This is the next stage of Invincible Book 1 by David Mack and Keith R.A. DeCandido, in which Commander Sonya Gomez has a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Personal log, Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53274.1. Dolan may be an expert on silicon-based life, but he needs some work on the carbon-based variety. The hospital, which is a solid, if crudely built structure, is full of people with either minor viral ailments, inevitable in a cross-species environment like this, especially since the Nalori aren't up to the Federation medical standards, or work-related injuries. Annoyingly, half the injuries were sustained thanks to the faulty antigrav units, which wouldn't have happened if any of these idiots had the brains to notice that the diagnostics were in the wrong mode. The first time I met a Galamite was on the Sentinel. I knew that they were basically humanoid, but with much larger brains. What I had not known, until that day on the Sentinel, was that you could see that brain. Their craniums are transparent. Dolan was shorter than the other Galamite I'd met, and he wore a hat. Razka told me later that it was at the request of Kajana. He gave the doctor 2 choices, Razka told me. Wear a hat to hide the brain or have the brain removed by hand. Dr. Dolan wisely chose the former option. So, the doctor said when Razka introduced us, you're the new boss. Welcome to hell, Commander Gomez. Thanks, I said dryly. Nice place you have here. Yes, the finest medical facility on the planet, primarily by dint of being the only medical facility on the planet. My best advice to you, Commander, is to never, under any circumstances, get sick. What comforting words from the local physician. Zilder was also in the hospital, putting pressure on a small wound he'd gotten when realigning one of the sensor towers. He pulled me aside and said, "You know why Dr. See-Through-Skull is here? Because no decent hospital in the Federation, or anywhere else, would take him. I only came here today because, while my faith in the great god Honig keeps me strong, this is the only place with bandages." With that, he smiled. I smiled back, but it was difficult. The hospital is about the level of a 22nd century colony hospital. They have, believe it or not, an X-ray machine. I was half expecting to see a suture kit, but Dolan at least had a dermal regenerator. By the time I left the hospital, the suns had set, and the day's work was done. Sarindar looks a lot different at night. During the day, it's one of the most beautiful sights in the galaxy. The crystalline trees and bushes stretch into the sky and shine in the sunlight. The prismatic effects are glorious. At the right angle, you can see a tremendous spectrum burst, rainbows without rain. It's a streak of colors from red to violet flying off into the sky. I have to admit, I spent a lot of time this first day letting myself get distracted by the colors and the bright beauty of it all. At night, though, it doesn't look like much of anything. Sarindar doesn't have a moon, so the only illumination is provided by the stars and by the dull lanterns that have been issued to the work camps. I wish I'd thought to bring some Starfleet lamps, which would have illuminated the whole place and perhaps glinted off the plants and ground. But the only one I have is attached to my sonic rifle. The Nalori lanterns cast the dullest of yellow glows. They seem to wash all the life out of the planet. Or maybe it's the workers themselves. They sit outside their tents. Tents! And eat, drink, play cards, tell stories, but there's no enthusiasm. Nobody is ever smiling. The stories I catch snatches of all sound depressing. The drunk ones are all melancholy, and the hungry ones only seem to be eating to sustain themselves. Though, given the quality of the food, that's probably all you can expect. And they all look at me with contempt as I walk by. I wonder how much of it is because I'm Starfleet, and how much is because I'm a woman. Not that it matters. I'm going to do this job, damn it. I've never failed an assignment yet. I'm not about to start now. Personal log, Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53274.9. It's amazing what you can accomplish by fixing an antigrav unit. Giroux skittered to my tent about 10 minutes ago and said, "It works." "What works?" I asked him. "The load lifter. I fixed everything in the diagnostic program and was wrong with it. And it works!" That's kind of how it goes, Giroux. That's what diagnostic programs are for. Well, maybe for you, but that's never happened here. "Did you fix the other units?" Giroux chirped. "No! I only just finished repairing the one you told me to fix." "It took all day?" "There were a great many things wrong with it. And to be honest, I'd never fixed one before. Usually we just smack it on the side." I put my head in my hands. "What about the rest of them?" "I fixed all the diagnostic routines on them. That was pretty easy, actually. And I assigned a detail to fix them first thing in the morning." Probably the same detail I wanted to fix all the antigravs in the first place. The point is, they all should be functioning within the next 28 hours. I needed that boost after the day I had had, though. I went with Razka to check up on the detail I had reassigned from tubing construction to digging, and it turns out that 9 of them called in sick. I went to Kajana to ask him about this. He stands almost 2 meters tall and has arms roughly the size of warp nacelles. He has more scars on his face and arms than any of the other Nalori in the workforce. Part of me is curious as to what led to that, but most of me thinks I'm better off not knowing. In any case, when I asked him about all the sick people, he said, "Oh yes, they've all come down with Dakota's disease. It's been going around. They'll be out for at least a day or 2. Dakota's disease is a minor respiratory problem. Not even a disease, really, more of a viral infection, but the doctor who discovered it was named Dakota, and the name stuck. It shouldn't even be enough to keep people off work. It is very easy, however, to fake the symptoms, especially with the substandard medical equipment in Dolan's hospital. In other words, the perfect thing for a sick-out. The erstwhile tubing detail didn't want to dig, so they decided to pretend to be sick to get out of working at something they didn't like. It's a particularly immature form of protest, and it wasn't something I was going to stand for. "Dakota's disease," I said with as much shock as I could muster. "I'll need their names right away." I started inputting commands into my pad. "They'll need to each be isolated in their tents for 56 hours. "Excuse me?" Well, standard quarantine procedure, I said offhandedly. We'll have to set aside 9 tents for each of them to stay in. Someone will have to be assigned to take them meals. Oh, and of course the tent assignments will have to be rearranged, but it should only discommode a few dozen people, and I'm sure they won't mind for the good of the project. I mean, we wouldn't want them all to come down with this, would we? Besides, those tents can easily accommodate 7 or 8 people instead of the 4 they have now. In fact, the tents barely fit 4, and Kijana knew it. Oh, I added, and they won't be able to take their personal items with them when they switch tents. Too much risk of spreading the infection. That won't be necessary, Kijana said. This happens all the time. So did inefficient work, bad design, and poor scheduling. That's all changing, and so's this. Now I want each of those 9 to report to the hospital, and once Dr. Dolan has verified that they have Dakotas, I want them each isolated in separate tents for 56 hours, as per Starfleet Quarantine Regulation number 4711946A, paragraph 9, subsection C. If they don't have Dakotas, I want them back at work immediately. Are we clear, Kijana? An interesting thing I've observed about a race with no discernible pupils is that they're not nearly as good at menacing stares as races with them. Nevertheless, Kijana's expression was not a particularly pleasant one. He finally said, "Very clear, Commander. I will let you know what the doctor tells me about their medical status." "I'm sure you will." Kijana walked off. Raska looked at me with a smile on his face. "You remembered that regulation number from memory. I'm impressed." I smiled. "Don't be, I made it up." Completely deadpan, Raska said, "I'm shocked that you would do such a thing, Commander. Simply shocked." I laughed at that, and then went on with the inspection. Not surprisingly, by the end of the day, all of the digging detail had reported to work. Of course, they were even more behind, but one takes what one can get. Personal log, Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53277.1. Giroux now thinks I'm the most amazing thing he's ever seen, and has been telling anyone who'll listen, and many who won't, about how I lifted the curse on this planet. He started calling me Sanyul, which sounds very similar to my given name and is Nalori for curse lifter. It took his detail until noon yesterday to get all the antigravs fixed, but they did it. The units continued to work flawlessly all afternoon and all day today, which is, as far as I can tell, the longest they've gone so far without any one of them breaking down since the project started. I'm fairly confident that we'll be back on schedule within a day or two. This has impressed some of the workers. Not all, mind you. The ones who tried the sick-outs still glare at me dolefully, though at least they're almost done with the digging. It should be complete in time for tomorrow's test of the antimatter reactor. Kijana also keeps glowering at me. Many others, though, have joined Giroux in calling me Sanyul, even smiling at me occasionally. Of course, I didn't lift any curses, really. I just applied myself to the task, but the Nalori seem to believe in curses, and who knows, maybe in some bizarre way I did actually lift a curse. Zilder keeps smiling and saying, Hodig works in very bizarre ways, and who am I to argue? But then maybe I'm feeling whimsical after the story Raska told me tonight. We were sitting outside my tent. And no, I still can't get over the fact that I'm sleeping in a tent. Sharing a particularly tepid supper of mashed vixbril, a root from the Nalori homeworld that's probably a delicacy when prepared right. There are legends of a monster, you see. There are animals here called the S.C.E. I told him I remembered reading about them in the mission briefing, and seeing them on the way down, for that matter. 4-legged creatures of solid crystal, they're predators, but not particularly harmful to carbon-based life, since they can only digest other silicon-based life. Kind of like the local equivalent of lions or sharks. Ah, yes, but you see, Raska explained, there is the monster S.C.E. Monster, I said dubiously. Raska's voice started taking on a sing-song quality, and he set aside his own bowl of vixbril. The monster comes after all those who would dare to try to tame Sarindar. All those who have come have been slain by the great beast, who claims the heads of the invaders as its prize. You're kidding, right? I said as I washed down the vixbril with some mineral water. Shrugging, Raska said, That is the story, anyhow. It is why there have been so few expeditions to this world. I thought it was because of the Chimerium and the suns. Again, Raska shrugged. Oh, they complicated things. It makes the world hard to function in. The natural beauty attracted many, but they stayed away because of the stories of the monster S.C.E. That's crazy. Raska grinned. Of course it's crazy. If it wasn't, you would not be here, Sanyul. Groaning, I said, Please don't call me that. But it's true. There may not be any monster SCE, but this place was cursed until you arrived. It's nothing any competent engineer couldn't have done. I'm much more interested in getting the antimatter reactor online. A task for tomorrow, to be sure. Unless, he said with a mischievous smile, the monster SCE attacks us in our sleep. Right. Oh, come now, don't humans tell fanciful stories before going to sleep? Actually, we do, particularly around campfires, or the equivalent, I added, pointing to the stove. My father often told me stories like that. Sometimes I tell them to my children, including the ones about the monster SCE. How many children do you have? 17. I almost dropped my spoon. He didn't seem to be old enough to have sired that many kids, and I said so. Well, it's much easier when you have 5 wives. 5. Yes. Okay. For some reason, the Nalori tradition of polygamy didn't come up in the cultural database I was given. It must be terrible for you to be so far away from them for so long. Not really. In fact, it's something of a relief. I never really considered myself the marrying type. Then why did you do it 5 times? Oh, it has to do with one's status. The more important you are, the more wives you have. Except, of course, it doesn't really work like that. You just accumulate wives to make yourself look more important. And besides, we have to propagate the species. Much easier to do it this way. I put my Vixbrill down unfinished. If you say so, I say so. Zilder came over and joined us. Commander, don't you like your Vixbrill? I'm just not that hungry. He smiled. That's because your spirit is empty. You need to fill it with the love of Honig. Raska good-naturedly let loose with a couple of epithets in the Nalori language. Zilder just laughed it off. You are impure, my friend, and that is a shame. He held up a small book with a cracked leather binding. The pages were dog-eared. This is a copy of the Serbeg. There's a passage in particular I'd like to read to you, if I may. He opened up the book and flipped to a particular page. I yawned and said, Zilder, my religious beliefs are just that. Mine. And none of your business. And while I'm sure the Serbeg is a fascinating read, I'm about ready for bed. Undaunted, Zilder turned to Raska. And what of you, my good friend? He yawned. I also say that it is time for sleep. Good night, Sonyul. I wished him a good night, and he went off to the tent he shared with 3 other workers. Zilder put his book away and scratched the ridge that bisected his face. You wait, Commander. I'll save your soul before this project is done, and Raska's as well. I promise you that. Good luck, I said with a laugh, wondering what Honig's views on polygamy were. Given that the Demiani have 3 genders and tend toward trios rather than couples, I suspect they might be lenient. Pity. It'd be an easy out for Raska. In any case, after wishing Zilder good night, I climbed into my tent and started this personalogue. Tomorrow we'll tackle the antimatter reactor. I'm looking forward to it. First Officer's Log. Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53276.9. The test of the antimatter reactor was a qualified success. Results appended. The injectors are not at 100%, and they need to be. If there's even the slightest imbalance, the warp pulse will be uneven, and the Chimerium will get shot sideways or back down into the planet's surface, which could cause incalculable damage. I was hoping to do a test of the SA within the next 2 days, but until the reactor is at peak, we can't risk it. The good news is that the dish should be completed within those 2 days, even if we aren't ready for the first test yet. Morale has been steadily improving. The fact that the antigravs function is the primary reason, I would say, although the crew that has been transferred to the digging details has been slow and malingering. Despite these problems, I believe we can complete our mission in a timely fashion. Personal log, Commander Sonya Gomez, Planet Sarindar, Stardate 53276.9. Zilder came to me this first thing this morning and didn't have a word to say about Honig. He did, however, have a lot to say on the subject of the ability of the antigravs to move the material for the reactors. They can't do it? I asked, incredulous. They can't do it on time, he said. At least not just 2 of them. There's no way we'll be able to have the thing completely assembled in time for the window. All the testing is being done during the windows when the sun's calmed down enough to allow outside contact. Sarindar has a 28-hour day. The windows are at high noon and midnight, and they only last from 13 to 22 minutes. I took out a pad and tried to see if there was some way to juggle the antigravs so that I could reassign one of them to Zilder, but they were all needed for other tasks. Now that they were all actually working, every subsection had great use for them. I didn't want anyone to lose their sudden enthusiasm for working. It was the only way to get anything significant accomplished. Kajana walked over then. Is something wrong? He asked. Zilder seems to think that you won't get the antimatter reactor online in time for the window to open at noon. Kajana looked down at Zilder. Really? Zilder swallowed. Not with only the 2 antigravs. See, it'll get done. Kajana interrupted. If the load lifters can't handle it, we'll use our hands. Don't worry, Commander. And for the first time since I landed, Kajana smiled. I smiled back. What? Me worry? Zilder looked at both of us like we were crazy and then said, Honig, help us all. Still smiling at me, Kajana said, Honig helps those who help themselves. I got distracted by other things until 13:55 hours, 5 minutes to noon local time, meaning that it was almost time for the test. And then I went to the reactor. Zilder informed me that it was ready. With the suns at their apogee causing a cascade of colors in the trees, I ordered the tests begun. The full results are attached to my officer's log. I looked over at Kajana, who gave me a knowing smile that seemed to say, we used our hands. Some work needs to be done on the reactor, but at least I'm making progress, both with the accelerator and with the workers. I'll whip these guys into shape yet. To be continued next week. Check me out online at DeCandido.net. Read my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com. And as I said at the beginning, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe, and I'll see you next week.